那我们看这个，如果大家学过第4段了，那我们再来看第5段。在第5段这一节里边，哈特森教授跟大家讨论金融资本的寻租问题。我们在第4段里边已经把这个为什么马克思在《资本论》第3卷里边强调资本主义，特别是工业化时代的资本主义是个进步，他打掉的是那个租和所谓债权人的那个收益，他对那个是强烈批判的，所以他认为资本主义的进步就在于他这个告别了地主经济的那个吃租经济的那个获利方式，它变成以市场交换形成价格，市场发现价格，然后价格来这个增加利润用这个资本主义占有利润的这个方式来形成它的资本积累。他用这套理论那就相对来讲呢，他指出了这个资本主义在产业资本阶段是这个理论的一个基础，他提炼出来这样一个分析，认为资本主义相对于封建主义是一种进步。
Well, this lecture is going to be about how finance capitalism is a promoter of rent seeking instead of industry. And the most wealth today is made by rent seeking. It's not made by building factories and making products. It's made by buying real estate and selling it at a profit, buying stocks and bonds and selling them at a profit. It's made by claims on the economy. And so finance is it protects the rights to private property. It also tries to cut taxes on wealth. The way that you get more money from real estate or stocks and bonds is you want the government to tax as little as possible. You want to shift the tax burden onto labor and onto industry, the exact opposite of what the classical tax policy was. And you want to get control of government. You want bribery. You want to buy control of the politicians by backing their political campaign so that they will pass laws, enact them in the courts to do things that help you. And again, the more money you make, this is called an increase in GDP, but it's the opposite of what the classical economics and Marx recommended. And in fact, instead of increasing public ownership since, let's say 1980 was the great change, the rentier interests, the financial, real estate, and insurance interests have regained much of the economic and political power that they seemed to be losing a century ago. Now, this counter-revolution is being led by the financial sector, and it really is a counter-revolution. Banking system centers have taken the lead in fighting against taxation. And most bank loans are collateralized by wealth. In order to get a loan to buy wealth, you have to have wealth that you pledge in the form of a house as collateral or stocks and bonds or your future ability to earn an income. And if you make a diagram of how the economy works, the finance capital is based on what's called the FIRE sector: finance, insurance, and real estate, followed by monopolies. So the FIRE sector is really a symbiotic sector. Finance, insurance, and real estate are not part of the industrial economy. They're not part of producing wealth, but they're extracting revenue, extracting rent, extracting insurance charges, extracting interest and financial fees. And what it extracts are at the expense of the rest of the sector. So many people who studied Marx are familiar with exploitation under industrial capitalism by the industrialists. But finance capitalism has its own mode of exploiting labor. Essentially, labor has to pay interest and penalties. It has to pay health insurance, and it has to pay rents for home ownership, or else it has to pay mortgage debt for it. So finance capitalism exploits labor by probably a larger dollar amount than the industrial profits are. And that's why finance goes to where the industrial profits are. In the early 19th century, when Ricardo wrote, finance made its money on international trade. So of course it wanted to back the specialization of labor, and it didn't mainly make loans to real estate because the landlord class owned that. But once you democratized home ownership, once you said land is no longer going to be owned just by the people and families that conquered England or America, but by anybody can have their own home and buy real estate. All of this is bought on credit, and all of a sudden the whole rent sector that classical economics focused on has been turned into interest for the financial sector. And essentially, the aim is to control what people need, so that whether you're a landlord or a drug manufacturer, you can say, our idea of the free market is your money or your life. Make a choice. Your free choice, you can live in the street, or you can borrow from us and have a home of your own. You can have a life of unemployment and poverty, or you can borrow from us and have an education so that you can afford to get a job, and then you can borrow more money to buy a car to drive to your job if you want to do that. So finance capital also helps industrial exploitation of labor, because once you can drive your labor force into mortgage debt and consumer debt and student debt and credit card debt, then all of a sudden, if you lose your job, you fall behind in these debt payments. And if you don't have the money to make your stipulated monthly payment on your credit card or your mortgage or your rent, then all of a sudden your credit rating goes down and the interest rate that you have to pay goes up to 29%. The GDP statistics in America say this is called financial service. And it's counted in GDP as the bank providing more services by taking the risk of having to charge you a higher and higher interest rate. Language is it's become Orwellian language, meaning you create an artificial vocabulary that means the opposite in print from what it used to mean. You've had the conquest of language. Now, healthcare has also become an increasingly important way of locking workers into their current jobs, because today most workers have their health insurance paid by their employer. Now, what that means is if you get fired, all of a sudden you don't have any healthcare anymore. And under the Obamacare program, you have to pay at least $6,000 per person to pay for your own health care without a job to pay. So workers are afraid of losing their job. And Alan Greenspan, the head of the Federal Reserve, explained to Congress that this is called the traumatized worker syndrome. Employers are afraid to form a union because they may be fired and lose their health care, and their credit card rates will go up. Or even if they complain about the job or unsafe working conditions, if they say, wait a minute, we want a mask so that we don't get the virus, they're considered a complainer, they're fired on the spot as a troublemaker, they all of a sudden don't have health care anymore, they're locked into the credit card debt, the mortgage debt, having to pay rent to a landlord, the health care, everything else. So finance capitalism locks employees into a traumatized, weak position where they're completely dependent. Now, the other point that I made in the earlier lecture is that finance capitalism is based on the mathematics of compound interest. It's an exponential growth in debt. Any interest rate is a doubling time. Any interest rate will double the debt in a given number of years. So economies can't grow as fast as the interest rate does. The rate of income growth for the last 10 years, ever since the Obama depression that he caused in 2009 by bailing out the banks instead of the indebted homeowners, wages haven't grown at all, but the debts have grown and grown and grown. So compound interest is what is vastly increasing the amount of debt. So every economy is like a Ponzi scheme. And a Ponzi scheme means you have to keep pouring more and more money into the scheme, in this case, into paying debt service, in order to keep the whole financial system from collapsing. And that's why the government now, the economy doesn't have any more money for people to pay the financial sector and their bank loans and mortgages when they work for restaurants that have been closed down, businesses that have been closed down. So the government is now printing the money and giving it to the banks and buying stocks and buying bonds and buying mortgage loans, so that all of a sudden you have to keep the debt growing faster than the economy in order to prevent a crash. But in the end, there is a crash. So all finance capitalist economies have to crash. That's inherent in the mathematics of compound interest. And more than any other economist of the 19th century, Marx spelled out what everybody had written about compound interest up to his time in volume 3 of Capital.
那我们看这段里面，他就回过头来再讨论为什么在金融资本主义，他又重新回到了相当于封建主义那种集权的那种群租。一旦他有以群租为主的获利方式，他就一定会寻找垄断权利嘛。所以他认为金融资本主义促进群租而不是推动工业，所以这是美国实体经济大规模衰败的一个内因。所以今天的大部分财富都是通过群租来获得的。比如说他指出了有4个部门，可以以他们3个部门就是这个3个部门的前字母呢，首字母组成的叫 fire， 就是这个火，着火这个 fire 也是开火的那个意思那就是 F 是 finance 就是金融， I 是 insurance 是保险，房地产叫 real estate， R 和 E fire 的后2个字母是房地产。所以他说呢，金融以新的方式束缚人的自由，债务呢增加就压垮了经济，特别是压垮了民众的生活经济。这些 fire 结合在一起呢，类似于一个国家的庞大的，整个这个国家都是一个庞大的庞氏骗局。庞氏骗局大家都知道，对吧？所以他说呢，当进入庞氏骗局的时候，这个经济走向最终的这个衰败是必然的，最终走向破产。